Welcome to Awakened Motherhood, the podcast where mothers share their powerful stories of healing and empowerment. I am your host, Amanda Quick, best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and advocate. In each episode, we dive deep into the stories of mothers who have overcome adversity, found their fierce feminine power, and embraced transformative parenting. Whether you're a mother driven to fight for your children or someone with a story burning inside you, this podcast is for you. Together, we'll explore themes of resilience, self-trust, and healing from our traumatic experiences, all spotlighting the profound journeys of awakened mothers. Join us for a space of naked authenticity, deep inspiration, and genuine connection. Embrace the divine feminine and discover your own warrior mama within. Welcome to Awakened Motherhood, where your story is the spark for change. Welcome, everyone, back to another episode of Awakened Motherhood. I'm your host, Amanda Quick, and today I am excited to introduce my guest, Kathy Ferris. Kathy is a divorced mother of 4 children. She is an advocate for women, educating and empowering their financial literacy and independence. She spends her time coaching women who are stuck in the should I go or should I stay phase of their relationship. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, as we were starting, I was like, oh my God, there's a loaded topic already.
It is a loaded topic. It's a heavy one, but
it's a heavy one.
Once you find your direction, it's all in alignment and it's the happiest you can be.
Yes. And most people listening to the show have heard some version of my story. So they know that I was in this position myself, but we're here more to talk about your journey. And, you went through this exact situation in a lot of ways and have come through the other side because of your experience. Can you talk a little bit about the person you were before?
Absolutely. So when I got married, I was 25. So I was on the younger side. I had my first child I was pregnant at like 26 and had her at 27. So again, young. My parents I'm going to kind of backpedal a little bit with my parents who they're still married to this day. They're the generation of, you stay married through thick and thin. But my situation with my parents was very loving. Your typical, you'd see them fight here or there, but a very loving couple and 100%, trust in one another and through all the trials and tribulations of life and of a marriage. So when I got married, I thought it would be the same, through thick and thin and really go through all the ups and downs together. And we were just starting off. My ex went through grad school and med school. So there was some of that going on that took a long time. And I had children while he was still in med school. So we were very much building, our empire together slowly along the way. And so we had 4 children. We ended up having 4 children. And throughout the marriage, I look back and I say, I don't know if I'm not going to say I was, dumb or stupid. Of course not. Just very naive to believing that somebody would have the same belief systems and the morals as myself. Even though you marry this person, it is 2 different people that you're
Right.
working with.
Right.
And so
Can you talk a little bit about what those belief systems were? Because I bet they're pretty relatable.
Sure. Especially as a stay-at-home mom, I believe that was obviously my job and we were both working together. Everything was, split 50-50. Yes, he brought home the actual money per se, but my job was taking care of everything else within the home. And within that, the morals, just more or less everything is split. There's no one higher than the other.
Mm-hmm.
We had joint bank accounts and credit cards. I never thought once that because I wasn't the primary card holder, I was just an authorized user. I didn't think anything of that. I was very naive in those ways of just thinking, okay, you own the business. This is in your name, or you're going to get the better credit, right? Because he's working on not anytime we applied for something.
So it's like modern traditional in a lot of ways.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, I could use I didn't have a budget, or I was the one that.
But you had access.
What?
You had access to
Yes,
resources
absolutely.
and money.
Yep, there was.
And to be honest, this is the exact position that I was in too. I was the stay-at-home mom. I didn't make the money, but I was on the checking account. I was on the credit cards, right? I had visibility. I could spend money. I wasn't given just an allowance.
Yes, same here. Was not given an allowance. Because I paid the bills. I did all of.
Right. I took care of the actual bills.
I took care of the actual bills. And one thing that I definitely didn't do, even though we owned a business together, it wasn't. I have to be careful how I word this. Owning a business together, because it was medical, I am not. Therefore, there was no name attachment. Now, looking back, there could have been something written in a post-nuptial agreement that would have guaranteed me the amount, the 50% that was owed to me. But so that's a huge takeaway that we can, get into in a bit. But it wasn't like we were starting our own plumbing business, right? And so we were working together. Maybe I was doing a little bit of the admin stuff while he was out, actually doing the plumbing work. So therefore, so fast forward, we're married for about 17, 18 years.
A long time.
I mean, the total time through even divorce is 21 years. So obviously, I think for most women, I'm going to say almost 100%. I don't think any woman just says, today, oh my gosh, I love him. This marriage is great. And then the next day you're like, I want a divorce. I think there's definitely a period of time that women, most women, I feel, really try to put their best effort in, try to, exhaust all avenues of some type of therapy, counseling, that to revive the marriage.
Especially when children are involved. I think it's probably less true if there's not kids, but with kids, especially multiple children, is a whole different thing, because you really don't want to impact your kids' lives. Nobody wants to have kids go back and forth. Nobody wants to deal with that.
No, that's not, and no woman signs up for that when they go into a marriage and say, oh yeah, in 18 years, I'm going to get a divorce and this is what it's going to look like for all of us, I do agree with that. I think if you have children, you definitely hang on longer. I feel secondly, if you are a stay-at-home mom and you're not, you've lost your identity and you've lost your means of income, and that you're going to be starting at ground zero again, that's number 2. And then 3 is just fear of judgment, why women stay as long as they do. But
especially if you're raised it, parents stay together forever, or you're religious, or any of the other reasons that, you've been a failure if you separate.
Yes. And I know that I felt that way. I know at the time I was the first one. There's 4, I have 3 siblings, so there's 4 children on my side. And I was the first one and the youngest to get a divorce. 2 are still married, and one since then has gotten a divorce. But so that was big too, parents that were still married. And then all my siblings were still married. So it was like, oh boy, this is something new. How is this going to go down? Which it's so funny, because when I look back at that, I know how I feel when people get divorced when I was even married. I truly can say with 100% certainty, there was no judgment. I never looked and said, oh, wow, they're getting divorced, or, oh, they're getting, or why. I don't even want to know. I don't care, because it doesn't impact me, So it is funny that it's still, there's this, this cloud over the word divorce, and how women still perceive it as like failure. And that you're broken. And I really think that that's such a shame in 2025 that women feel that way.
It really is. And I do think there are circles in which things are said that imply that, especially, in religious, especially areas where, you try to go to the pastor for marriage counseling, and it's, divorce is not a conversation. It's not an option. Or if you see somebody get divorced and you see them leave the community, or you see them shunned. It's not necessarily a pointed conversation, but it perhaps can be almost this implied, you're going to lose everything else too, right? You're going to lose not just your marriage and your income, but your community.
Yes.
And
And you know
that's,
it's very ironic because I don't feel in the conversations I've had with men, I mean, obviously I can't speak from that perspective, but from the men that I've spoken to, it is a totally different people. There's judgment for guys. Like if you really think about it, when you're going through a
I know.
divorce, what's the first thing? Like the woman, like, what's she gonna do?
Mhm.
Or how's she gonna survive or do what, but the men, there's like, oh, he's divorced and he moved on and he's with someone else or not. Or there's like, no one spends a second even thinking about the male side.
I would say it's always the woman's fault, right?
Yes, always the woman's fault. Yes.
I mean, I felt like it was my fault in spite of the chaos that I was in and the situation I was in. It was still my job to keep the family together. And so if it broke up, that was my fault.
Mhm.
That was like this deep thing in me that it was my job to figure out how to keep this together. Like the women were the glue that holds the family. And so if we fall apart, it's our fault.
Yes. And again, it's amazing because it doesn't matter. I'm going to speak on like, let's say abuse, right? Whether it's
Mhm.
physical,
Doesn't
mental,
matter.
emotional, it doesn't matter. And now financial abuse is near and dear to my heart. And it doesn't matter that you've gone through that. It's still like, why couldn't you stay longer, or why couldn't you
Yeah.
work it out? Or um, I'm hoping that that'll change. And that's obviously the work that I'm putting in there to let women know that, we hear it all the time. It sounds cliche that there's, life is short, but it really is true. And if you're living, every day where you feel like you have this awful, like gut feeling in your stomach and you're not in alignment, what's true to you, I I want women to know it's okay, that you can
Yeah.
break away from that, because what you're doing to yourself internally and then what you're doing to your children, if you have children, the biggest, most, loving human beings in your life, that you are their role model and that you would love for them to emulate all your positive traits. You staying in a relationship that's loveless is only
Mhm.
teaching them
Yeah.
that this is marriage. This is what a marriage
Yeah.
looks like, when really it's the complete opposite.
Right. So 17, 18 years in, you have you start separating. What happens? What's the
Yes.
moment for you that like wakes you up?
So I had asked, I was feeling a certain way for a good year or two. I had expressed that I would be filing for divorce if certain things didn't change. And I put a time frame on it, and it didn't change. And therefore, when the switch flipped, that was it. I knew that we couldn't go on together, and so I started the divorce process. So that in itself, my divorce, I feel like, is a loaded question, because I want to say that I did tell him that I would be filing for divorce. I didn't want it to be a surprise. I said, but I can't be doing it this week. I just want to let you know next week I will be. And so just kind of a
Mhm.
heads up. And he went out and filed before me. So
This is a common tactic. People are always shocked to hear I wasn't the one who filed for divorce. My ex-husband was. People are always shocked when they hear that. But this is and I actually was interviewed by this woman once who was a social worker. And she told me that that's actually a really, really common scenario, is that the abuser is trying to get the upper hand. They're trying to get control of the situation. And so if they see the writing on the wall, they go ahead and do it. And then they try to use that as a manipulative tactic. And when they file, then they file with this is what I want, and this is how I'm going to do things. And
mhm,
it became another method to control.
yes, 100% control. And because they know, right? They're losing it. So this is trying to hold on to
Yeah.
another way. Just like you said, what happens after and what they, file against you is just ludicrous. But we can get into that. But going back to, him filing, we had to wait. There's 90-day, like a grace period, right?
Mhm.
And so that's obviously 3 months. And
What state are you in?
Connecticut.
Okay. Every state has a different waiting period or not. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, ours is 90 days. So within that 90 days, we're waiting. And then right before, the 90 days, it was, I think, actually on like the 90th day, he ended up, pulling the papers and, voiding it out and saying, nope, I don't want a divorce. So therefore, I then had to
It's such a common scenario. Like, so my ex-husband tried to cancel. He tried to pull it also, but we had gone too far into the process. I had already received the paperwork, but once he realized the control mechanism was not working in his favor, it didn't scare me to come back to him, which is what he thought was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
He tried to cancel it, and except he needed my permission to do so. But it sounds like in your state, you actually could redact.
Yes. Within the, as I said,
within the 90 days.
Grace period.
Yeah.
Grace period.
Yeah.
So I just had to sit and wait. And then, within 90 days is up, waiting 3 months. And then I had to file. So I files right away. But then that takes 3 months. So
Another
months
yep.
there. So it's a half of a year. That's a long time when you're talking divorce. So
were you living together in this 6-month period?
Because at that time, I'm telling you, if one thing went wrong,
I'm relating in just like it's horrible.
It's horrible, and I'm going to throw in there COVID.
Oh,
it was December of 2019 when he filed. So it was July, and so now my 90th day ended on December 31st, 2019. So now we went into January 2020. Well,
nobody knows what's coming.
And we all, we didn't know what was coming, but in March,
the
world was shutting down, right? So
yep.
that prolonged my divorce just in general as well, because they were pushing, obviously, that, divorce cases back. They were not, high of importance of getting resolved during that time. So we were living together, and then March came and he moved out for a short period of time due to my daughter coming home. She was home from college, and the kids just knew, like, it was because of the divorce, right? That he had moved out. But that was March, and July 4th, he wanted to move back in. I don't know too many people that, want to move back in, but he was saying that he had moved out due to COVID because of his work, and he didn't want to take the chance of getting any of us sick. But now that we know, and la di da, he's going to move back. So motion was filed to move back, and the judge at the time allowed him to come back.
Oh, geez,
come back into the house. And my daughter was there, and she was there in support of herself and her siblings, not be on one side or the other. It was just like, we can't have mom and dad together because they fight. We don't want them living together. And the judge was still like, come on in, come back. So now we're back in the house together, and he definitely tried to, get back together. Quite frequently, saying that he didn't want this. And, that was a heavy dose of that every day, saying that I was wrong, that we got married, we took vows, all of that. And that I was wrong for leaving. And so that, again, was throughout the summer. By the end of summer, I didn't have any financial means for anything, because it was always his paycheck. He was, taking the paychecks, and that was that. There was no money coming in. At that time, we also had, car payments weren't being paid. Mortgage wasn't being paid. With many of those papers, so this day that I've saved, just because when you're in this situation, it's like you've got to document everything and have everything. And even with documents, it's still like, It's an awful game to play, really, with the court system. So I was left with nothing. Credit cards were, maxed out, which I really want to hone in on that. When a woman doesn't have any money, how is she supposed to afford a lawyer? Just plain and simple as that. If there's no money coming in, how does a woman get someone to represent her? It's very unfortunate. And in the court system, I say our court system isn't broken. It's just corrupt. Because if it's broken, you'd really try to fix it. But I feel like if
The whole thing needs to be torn down. That's how broken it is.
what?
The whole thing needs to be
Oh
torn
my
down.
goodness.
That's how broken it is.
Completely. I use it truly because I think when I say Judge Judy, what do you think of? You think about a woman who's like, laying it down. But truthfully, if that's the only one that we have as an example that we could even say, like, yes, that's what I wanted. And I wanted that judge to come down on me if I was doing something wrong. Like, let's not waste everyone's time and money. You've got 30 days to hand in all your financial, your financial affidavit, any banking statements, asset, whatever. And
But there's no consequences when they don't.
No consequences.
No.
I didn't have anything. So I didn't own a business. I mean, everything was like in our business name, our house. We had, that in-laws were on that title too. So there was that. There was just a lot that I didn't have anything of my own. All bank accounts were together. Credit cards were together.
Wow.
So there was no way for me to, obtain
Do anything.
savings and from that. So I feel like women need to be.
And this is common. This is a common scenario that that women are in this situation. And when you're on the accounts, you feel like, well, I have access. But then what you don't realize is you could be taken off.
Yes. You have no access to, doesn't matter if your name's on that account, on the banking and checking, obviously you both, checking and savings, you both need to, sign off on that. So that's number one. And any type of.
They could just move they can just move paychecks to a different account. Like,
yes,
it's easy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And even, credit cards, you can, if you're not the primary, then basically I couldn't even, at one point I was trying to call just to find the balance and they wouldn't even give that to me.
Yep.
And, so during that time, I think we had like $20,000 worth of rewards on that. That we had just accrued, and never saw a dollar of that because they got cashed in and you could say that you used them for, your kids' well-being and food. Mm-hmm. And somehow judges will believe that you've spent that much in one year on food, for your kids. So it's so simple. I mean, I feel like it could be so simple where you're, no BS, just, these are the documents I need. And if you don't hand them in, then boom, it all goes to her. And if I don't hand it in, my half goes to him. If you did that, if there was actually a punishment, you wouldn't have these divorces that last 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
It's used as a manipulation tactic. And I know my ex, he didn't have quite as much power as you did, that because I, by some grace of God, took different steps and set myself up prior to that. And I had gotten a job and had my own income before divorce was filed. And so I was in a different situation come the actual family court. But at the same time, he still dragged his feet. He still didn't respond. He still didn't give his documents. He still didn't do what he was supposed to, even while standing in front of the judge saying, yes, we will. Turn around and just ignore it. I mean, he ignored motions for months. There is no recourse.
And how is that, right? Like, don't you question yourself, like, just how is that possible that they can ignore emotion? And I know in my case, many people had said, oh, why don't you get a forensic accountant?
Mm-hmm. With what money?
What money? I don't get it because at that time too, when the motions were starting to at least be filed and divorce was underway, it was still COVID. So people weren't working, So I couldn't even go back to work. I had a part-time job.
Well, it was really hard to find jobs. It was really hard to do a lot. And if you don't have work history, it's not like you're going to make very much money.
Yes.
And, it's a really hard position to be in because you think you're building this life together. And so your role and the value of being home is, especially when your kids are young, is really high. But at the same time, when things go south, you've set yourself up in a lot of ways to really not have anything.
To have nothing. I mean, I say I left with my retirement fund. That's it. The sale, I wanted to sell the house at the time, which we all know that the prices were selling, they increased exponentially during that time. And they were saying, oh, you'd only get, 500,000 for your house. But then literally it was 18 months later and it was sold for 800. So, even the judge, we had actually a mediator. We had two attorneys met with the judge a few times and then went over a session with a mediator about certain things. And mediator at that time was still like, oh, yeah, no, you're not going to get much for the house because of this equity that we had, the equity line of credit that we had placed on it, blah, blah, blah. Again, the in-laws were on the title as well. So that played a little bit of a part. And I was like, no, this is ridiculous. Like, I know it can sell, like who, and I just had to kind of sit there dumbfounded and just let go of all power because I'm having a mediator, a former judge, two attorneys, at least my attorney, right? Another attorney going back and forth about this. And I have no money again to maybe even hire a different attorney. So you throw your hands up. And actually my attorney never got paid until a year and a half later because we weren't making money to pay the lawyer monthly. So that in itself, I want to be very careful on what I speak. But if somebody's not getting paid in any career, any job, I don't know if they're going to do their best work.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know about how much my divorce cost $75,000 and that's just my bill. And so I'm sure he had a similar bill, maybe not as high because I did a lot more extensive research and different things, but still it was 18 months long and $75,000. Most people don't have, even people who have money aren't sitting on $75,000 of liquid assets.
Yes. And let's face it, again, if a woman isn't working and doesn't have her own income, like you said, you had started providing for yourself, which is great. You have zero income. And then you have no idea, like I'll always have COVID attached with my divorce that went through a pandemic. So there was really, no money.
If he had filed or something before, like if he hadn't been arrested and I was just the stay-at-home mom, and if he had filed for divorce, he would have had so much more power and control. And I would have, I hadn't worked in 5-6 years. We weren't married that long, but I had 3 very young kids. Like I would have been in a very different situation than I was. And even then, it was still used as a method and manipulation tactic through the entire process.
Yeah. And again, I completely agree with you. I relate to the situation. I think so many women are listening and probably, me too. Because
you're not alone. None of you are alone.
You're not alone. And I just feel like, I'm really, in one sense, I'm not surprised because if you just look at the world and the way it is in 2025 and where, women fall in the work environments and just even with women's rights compared to males, it's not surprising, but it is surprising, if that makes sense, Yeah,
we think we're living in the modern era where everything is different and there's still a lot of reality checks. And so, what I hear you talking about is now you have all of these lessons learned.
Yes.
And so now you're taking these lessons and you're helping women who are in this uncertainty place set themselves up differently before the papers are filed, perhaps, before they're even having those conversations. What do they need to do up front, right? Making sure they have separate financial resources, they have credit that they've started to build, right? They're kind of thinking ahead. If I go down this road and I get cut off, how am I going to support myself? How am I going to support my kids?
Yes. And, I really am passionate about helping the married women that are in a loving marriage. Let's start there, because most people think if you're divorced, oh, you're just here to help divorced women. But it's really, I hone in on the married women because I want them to protect themselves while they are in a loving marriage, while their husband loves them and thinks they're the best thing since sliced bread. That's the time to go and complete a post-nuptial agreement, get everything verified, signed and sealed, and go over everything from, cats, dogs to children to the toaster to who's going to get what. That way everything is already spelt out, especially, this is for anyone that's married, but even if somebody is in a more tricky situation where there might be a family owned or run business that an uncle on that side owns a percentage of, when it gets really, nitty gritty, that's when it's even more important, because if your name isn't on, there's no way that you can even try to fight for a percentage of whatever that business is, or that could even be a home. There's a home that could be in an estate, and, other siblings on your husband's side can own it. So in that sense, it's really just knowing what are your assets, what are you guys working with, what have you built so far, what are all the things that you can encounter as, the next 5-10 years goes on. You can always, revisit it every 5 years if you're like, oh, hey, we, bought another house or whatever it may be. And you can definitely modify a post-nuptial agreement, but it is 100% better to do it when you're in a loving situation. Because all too many times there is definitely one person in a divorce that's going to feel like they're getting gypped, and that they're, she took me for everything, or he didn't give me anything. And so let's eliminate that. And, why have a judge somebody who doesn't know you, which I think is still so archaic in our system, that you go through this process and this person who doesn't know anything about you is just hearing the information from many times your attorneys, not even yourself, and they get to,
Decide
your fate and where you're, what's best for your kids. Don't you know what's best for your kids? So it's so important. So the married part is definitely, I'm very, heart goes out.
So it's almost, it sounds to me a little bit like estate planning, but with an individual focus, right? Because there's when you're planning for your death, essentially, when you're estate planning, but when you're thinking about a postnuptial agreement, you're still collecting what do we have and who is actually the owner of it. And there is a question of what happens should something happen to me. And also, if we were no longer together, is this mine? Is this 50-50? Is this... But you're having an honest conversation. And hopefully, if you're in a happy marriage, you can have these open, honest communication conversations.
Yes. And if you're in a healthy relationship, like 1,000%, you should be having these conversations.
And if you can't have this conversation, this is a red flag.
This is a red flag. It really is. If you're like, oh no, he would take... I've heard it all from women, even when I was married versus even being divorced. I've heard conversations with women and had conversations with women that say, oh God, no, I'll never leave him because he's going to take me for everything. Or, oh no, I don't want to,
I'll be out on the streets or whatever.
Yep. And that is a major red flag. If anything, we're both here saying, take a look, because that is not helpful.
Well, and if that's what's going through your head right now, I definitely would encourage you to sit down and think about how can you set yourself up so that if this happens in the future, you're not out in the cold. And maybe you can't have the post-nuptial conversation, but can you go get your own bank account? Can you open your own credit card now so that you have some options should you need them? because it's way easier to do. Something I learned, when you're an authorized user on a credit card, you actually receive that on your credit. But the moment you get off, because they can just pick you off, the card vanishes and you no longer have history. And so even if you don't have regular income, you can use household income for credit cards. Even if you've never had a bank account, go have one, just one in your name. That doesn't even have
That's
to
it.
have a
All
lot of
you
money
need
in
is
it.
one. You
You don't have to do a lot. But if you're listening and thinking there's no way I can have this conversation or I might be screwed, there were a couple of things, and maybe you can add, maybe what are the other kind of recommendations you would have for women who, have this sort of realization that they might not be in as loving relationship as they thought.
Yes, if again, I'm just going to reiterate what you said. If you're feeling like I can't have this conversation, if that's the first thing that comes to mind, that really is a red flag. Again, obviously no judgment here from either one of them. But
I've been divorced 3 times.
yeah,
I will raise my hand. I have done all of the versions of divorce. There is zero judgment.
yes, exactly. I think as women, it is in my heart to help women and not have you go through what I went
Yeah.
through. So
Learn from our mistakes.
yes, 1,000%. And I mean, I'm doing
Yes.
that even with my 2 daughters, but I'm still
Yeah.
an advocate for young women who are just starting off 18, 19, 20, really trying to steer them in the right direction and have them, always have their career. Don't ever walk away from that. Stay with it. And I can kind of bounce that into what you're saying about people, for women who feel like they can't have this conversation, what could they do? And you are right. One thing is definitely get a checking account, savings account. Get one now. And even if you've got, $25, throw it in there and at least
Yeah.
start it. If you don't have a career, if you're still at home with your children, start looking at what is it that you would like to do? Can you go back to your old job? Do you want to go back to that type of job? Or if you want to find something else, maybe you can start, branching off, and really should be branching off in that direction to get the necessary skills or education for
Yeah.
that job. Um, and also knowing your vehicle. Like, is your vehicle just in your husband's name, or is it in both of your names? Maybe you can have it transferred into your name, because going through a divorce, anyone will fight you for anything. And even though both of your names are on it, if your ex or soon to be ex, if that's the route you're going, says, all right, well, no, I want to sell this car.
And you don't have any credit or income to buy another one.
Yep. Then you have no car, you have no checking
Yeah.
account, you have no
Yeah.
or work
Yeah.
experience. So
Yeah.
definitely moving in that direction to establish, again, because getting all of that is going to also help with your credit, which you obviously need
Yes.
for all of this, which is, even getting a credit card. And I would highly recommend get a credit card. Doesn't matter which one, that it could be one that's, $500 limit. Who cares? Just you're starting to really invest in yourself for security and stability. The worst thing that can happen to any female, really any person, is money is power. Money can be evil, and people can treat it evil. And you see the greedy side of some, but it really ultimately is power. And without it, you can't buy the necessary things that you need when you're going through a divorce. And that's not only an attorney, that might be, a safe home, a safe place to stay, even if it's a 1-bedroom or a studio apartment. Doesn't matter how big it is, but you're not going to be able to afford any of that without any money coming in.
Something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're going to
Yeah.
be
No, I
in
think
that abuse.
I think those are great call outs. And, I think so many women find themselves, even if they're dragging their feet or thinking about it, and then, he goes out and files, or he starts to do something different, or whatever happens. And then you're finding yourself reactive, and it's almost like you can't keep up because you didn't think about all of this. You didn't realize, and you never thought the person you were married to would behave this way. You never thought they would treat you this way or be so callous. But especially in these manipulative situations where the divorce is about another level to control, that's the perfect opportunity for them to use every situation they possibly can.
Somebody had said to me when I was going through divorce, and it is the truest statement, and I've passed it on to others since then. But you never truly know the man that you're married to until you divorce him.
Yeah.
And that can go the same for a woman. You don't know the woman.
100%.
And
And you know what?
and that's
You'll never truly know yourself until you're in that situation either.
yes. And it is very, very true, because if the person that we talk about and the stories that you hear about, would we ever put ourselves in that situation?
I wouldn't sign up and say, me, please. That one.
Wow,
No.
he's a
No.
him. I want him. So,
Oh, jeez.
definitely.
If only the version of us making those decisions as very, I was 19 when I met my kid's dad. So, the version that was still a child in many ways knew what I would learn 10, 15, 20 years later. Oh my goodness gracious.
And like you said, I mean, when you're young at 19, like 18, it's hard. I know that I speak of this, and some young women are like, okay, yeah, they're not even listening. It's truly going in one ear, out the other. Just like for many people, even adults that don't have life insurance, that's going in one ear, out the other. I get it. If you feel like it's just not going to happen to you, then what's the importance of it? But if I can reach even a few women, right, I'm doing what I meant to do, and to educate and empower them that they will never have to feel stuck in a situation that it's not a loving situation. They're unloved, and just an abusive situation. And they stay that way until their last breath. I mean, I hate to be, but that is very true. I know
it happens.
so many
It happens.
women that, having had conversations, another reason why I stayed married so long is because with 4 children, I had many conversations on, sidelines and basketball court. And I can't tell you how many people, oh, I can't stand my husband. Oh, I don't like to have sex with him. Oh, I wouldn't want to divorce him because he'll be evil to me. And you're just listening, and I'm thinking, oh, all right, well, if I feel this way and they feel that way, then, I guess this is marriage. I guess this is how most,
this is normal to hate our spouses. This is normal to
really normal.
Tiptoe around on eggshells. And it's, it might be normal. It is not okay.
Yeah. I think it's still, I feel like it's not even normal. I feel that because of where we still are with women being less than in society.
It's expected. It's so common.
Yeah. The judgment, like you said, falls on the woman, and why, what did she do? And, and I feel like I really want to throw this out for stay-at-home moms. Like, they're so ungrateful. Like, she got to stay home, and she got this lunch.
Oh, that was the story I told myself. That was my story. I said, I'm so privileged. I got to, nobody gets maternity leave in the US. So few people can afford to do this. I am in a privileged position. And I still felt immensely guilty that I wasn't also adding financial means to the household. Both of those things were true.
Yes. And it's still, that's very prevalent in society. I know nothing's changed. I meet women, as I said, my divorce has only been 4 years, but even women today are, the judge swayed this way because in this, and I guess in this area, it's a privilege, which, it surprises me because I don't know what state you're in, but Connecticut, being very liberal, you'd feel like they'd see the value in women.
Yeah, the kid's divorce, the one with their father, that was in Colorado, which is similar. And I'm in Oregon, so things are different here. But especially when you have assets and kids, it's a lot. And I really had to set myself up, and I'm glad that I did in the way that I did, because there was already enough to be navigating. But there was definitely attempts to utilize the system to control, and attempts to drag his feet and not respond and not do things. And even when there was agreements from both parties about accounts, he still wouldn't actually do the thing. And he still wouldn't actually transfer things over. And it nearly cost me a purchase, actually, because I was trying to move. And he refused to give me the house that was assigned to me on the title because just because the judge says it doesn't mean it actually happens in actuality. There's still accounts that have to be transferred and money that has to move. And he still wouldn't do that. There had to be repeated. And, that's all billable hours and time that you have to pay to continue to, right? So it's like this adding and stacking of, the lawyer costs and the interactions, not to mention the emotional impact of, everything that's gone on. And this is, a house that the children would live in, and just so many things. And it's another method of control. And so I think this is a really important conversation for happily married and people thinking about getting divorced. And even if you're in the middle of it, really thinking about this in a more strategic way about the system is not going to help and save. This is something that you have to actually take control of and make decisions to set yourself up.
Yes. And I feel like if I'm going to make it relatable, one thing that I say is, with a prenuptial agreement, a postnuptial agreement, you'll hear many different men and women give their perspective on that, saying, well, if we do a prenup, then it's, we're kind of basically saying we're already setting ourselves up for failure. And I disagree because in this life, I can only be responsible for myself, my actions, my choices. I am now attached to someone. I get married. So regardless of that unit being supposedly being, you're one, you're still two individuals. So I can't control him. I can't control his emotions or what he is going to do or not.
Nor should you want to.
Nor should
really.
I want to. So it really is, in a sense, a business transaction. And I mean that in the 100% way, because again, you're just the minute you invite one other person into your relationship, it does become like a business. So it's no different than if I were to work for you and obviously you sign a contract. Why does an employer have someone sign a contract? Shouldn't they just trust that I'm going to be a good employee? And that's that's how I equate it. I'm like, there's contracts written for everything. Apple, iPhone.
Well, I mean, is it just because there's sex involved? We don't need contracts? Is that?
I don't get it. I mean, you have to always assign something.
That's true.
Right? Nothing.
It's true.
Everything comes with a contract now.
I mean, your marriage license is a contract in a sense.
It is. And so there you go. There you go. Yeah. It doesn't matter. You just said it.
Yeah.
It is a contract.
Yeah. It is a contract.
You have no idea. I just think of for women who, I say this to the younger women, 18, 19, trying to be relatable to them, that, think of a boyfriend that they've had in the last, it could be 3 years or whenever they started dating, even if someone's 25. Did all of them end wonderfully? Or did you have this that you were like, he was an ass or whatever? And, can you imagine this, you can't even talk to that person, right? If it ended so abruptly, and can you only imagine if everything was decided for you, right down to the coffee maker, basically, for some of these divorces? Do you really want to go through that? Or do you want to protect yourself in all the ways that you can? So that you can enter into a marriage that just knows that document is there and is like, cool, I think I might love him even more. She might love me even more because I know what we're into. I know what's going to happen. So there's no reason to fight. It's all right here. We have spelt it out for each other, not the judge or the lawyers.
Well, and it truly gives transparency, so that if any party decides this isn't working for me anymore, it's a very we already know the outcome. We already know we know the consequences of cheating. We know the consequences of whatever the sets of things are that would break up the relationship. Both people already know what's going to happen, and so they get to make decisions with more information, actually, because it's clear. Okay, if I no longer choose to be this unit, this is how we will proceed.
Yes. I don't see, I would never go into another marriage without one. Yeah.
I think I'm done married.
Yeah.
Just period. 3 is enough.
Yeah.
Fail. I'm over it.
You're done. I mean,
I'm not even 40 and I'm done.
yeah, I would
So
say just keep dating. Be in the honeymoon period all the time.
I'm just not even, and my kids are 10, 12, and 14. I can't even think about that right now.
Yeah,
Because
you're in the thick of it.
just,
Those are some busy ages.
but yes, in the future, sure, I would love to date or meet somebody, but gosh, the idea of trying to meld my life with somebody again is just, thank you.
It's like the only time it sounds like appetizing is when, okay, maybe when all the kids are out, right, out of the house, and there's really like you're older, where you're ready to like really downsize and not have anything but like a car and a
Correct. Right. And everybody brings the same amount of assets, but you keep your things and we never need to merge this situation. I don't want to.
I'll have my coffee.
You still have your house because you can go
Yeah.
That's about as far as I would be interested in today. I'm sure that will change in the future, but right now, that's it.
You're not alone. There's so many that are kind of in those shoes. And, I was only married once and I'm kind of good for that. I'm good.
Yeah.
I've learned to never say never, but I am so much wiser. And I think also when you go through anything once, twice, three times, again, you can't control the other person. So you are putting, your eggs in a basket and hoping and praying that they'll be a good person. But you do get to kind of, you grow wiser and stronger and you can set those boundaries and you know what you're going to put up and you know what you're not going to put up with.
100%. And your one marriage lasted longer than all 3 of mine combined, but so
No,
we just do things.
Angel.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. But and each of my marriages ended for different reasons. And, only one of them was the really high conflict, really expensive. My third divorce was actually the way I would encourage everybody to get divorced. There is 0 waiting period in Oregon. And we filed co-filers and the judge signed the paperwork 24 hours after filing. Done. That's fastest, easiest. Walked away. He left it
together though. And
no. So I learned from previous things and he didn't bring anything into the marriage in the same way. And I had established assets. And so we didn't even have a joint checking account. He was an authorized user on one of my cards. And that was basically it. And he paid me like rent, essentially. And so he packed up his personal belongings, left the country. I filed paperwork and it was done. And so, while yes, we were legally married, we never really co-mingled our assets. And so it was so much different than the previous scenario. But we also didn't have children together. We didn't have all of that. And we never really built that life either.
Yes. It's a completely different ball game when you have children. They are always,
it really is.
You're thinking of them for many years before you think of yourself. And even though, as I said, I was thinking in the wrong way, staying for them when really they were looking at, their father and I and the way that we interacted and didn't interact and thinking that that was normal. And so that was such a disservice to them. I wish I had, done something earlier. But again, there's no judgment on that because it is what it is. And I think that they're doing very well given the situation.
Yeah. Well, Kathy, this has been a really great conversation. You have so much wisdom and lessons learned from your journey. And I always love it when people turn around and take those lessons and want to help other people with them. It's, kindred spirits here. So I really appreciate this. And I would love it if you would share first how people can find you if they want to have the conversation and dig in deeper, and maybe they're on the fence and they need some support, as well as if you have any last words of wisdom that you would like to share with the audience.
I would love to let women know who are stuck in their relationship, and that goes for whether they're married or not married, but you're still in that relationship. Know that it does get easier. You are stronger. There's always someone worse off than you. And I think when you have that mindset where it's like, okay, if she can do it and, I still have this home or I have at least a car, somebody is always worse off and they are making the changes, that you can do it and you will live such a happier, more healthier, peaceful life with yourself. Like start with yourself first and don't even think of another man, in your life. Finding pure happiness for you first is the ultimate goal, number one.
Yeah.
Um,
Amen.
and if you want to find a way to get a hold of me, you can go to kathyferris.com, my website. You can click on for a free consult and we can chit chat that way. Also, I'm on Instagram at Kathy Ferris Coaching. And you can always message me that way. But I always have some good insights that I'm throwing out on Instagram as well. And
awesome. And I will link all of that in the show notes too.
Yep. And I am in the recording phases of a new podcast, which I'm so excited about. That is really that's my jam. Like that, right.
I love it.
And it's called Catapulting Confidence, Catapulting Confidence. And it is broken up to kind of 50-50, all things, 50% all things women would ever go through. And then the other 50% is divorce, really getting some all divorce information. There's attorneys that I have on as guests. And of course, they're not giving any legal advice, but we just talk about things that happen to either myself or other women. They bring in their wisdom and just try to better educate women to set themselves up for a better life while they're going through divorce.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. Yeah. And I will put all of those links in the show notes. And Kathy, this has been a wonderful conversation. I deeply appreciate your time and your wisdom and your story and your vulnerability and putting yourself out there and sharing what you walked through and how you've changed your life. So thank you.
No, thank you so much for having me. I've completely enjoyed it. It was such a great time to bounce things back and forth since we have similar stories. And thank you for what you're doing. I definitely want to throw that in there because the more that we keep sharing our stories and getting it out there, we're helping, a woman here and there every time. So kudos to you.
Absolutely. All right. And I will see you all in the next episode. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on Awakened Motherhood. I hope today's episode inspired you and offered support for your journey. Remember, your story has the power to ignite change, and your resilience is a testament to your strength as a mother. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Share it with other mothers who might benefit from our stories of empowerment and healing. I invite you to connect with me on social media platforms at Amanda Quick Healing, or visit my website, amandaquickhealing.com, for more information on other ways to work with me. Until next time, keep embracing your divine self and discovering your warrior mama within. Thank you for being part of Awakened Motherhood, where your story is the spark for change.